Let me just say right off the bat, I am so excited for the War of the Rohirrim. This movie that is meant to come out later this year, which we haven't even gotten any sort of teaser trailer yet for, has just captured my imagination, has captured my attention and my excitement. I really want this to be a great movie. Now, this might kind of fly in the face of all the videos that I've done of just tearing into the Rings of Power. People might be thinking, Lars, why are you giving Warner Brothers another chance? I mean, didn't they screw up with The Hobbit? And Amazon screwed up even worse with the Rings of Power. Why on earth are you giving these people another chance to delve into Tolkien's Middle-earth just to screw it all up again? To which I say, yeah, there is always the risk, but have you seen this interview with Philippa Boyens? This might be a bit of old news, but when I clicked on it, I was wary. I was like, what are we getting with this here? And then just to hear all of the right things and not cooked and not baked according to some specific recipe. None of the stuff that we get from J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay where they drop like every 30 seconds, oh, you're the Frodo to my Sam. Let me say something strange and elvish. You know that one crazy monster from the appendices? Oh yeah, we have that. Did I mention that I love Tom Bombadil? I named my son Tom in honor of Tom Bombadil. Stupid stuff like that lets you know that these aren't real nerds, that they're trying way too hard, and that they don't really respect the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. However, listening to Philippa, I was like, wow, hearing her stumble over her words, she's just all like, oh, I love this. I remember when I was a girl and my mother gave to me the trilogy, and I was scared because they were such big books. And then as I started reading them years later on, because I just felt bored and I felt whatever, I was read this and then realized this is amazing. And she passed on to me her love of saga and epic, and I've passed that along to my daughter, and I get to now work with my daughter on telling this amazing story that I didn't even know we would have the chance to tell. Hearing that, I was like, you've got me sold. Because that is the kind of producer, that's the kind of writer, that's the kind of fan and intellect that we need in a Tolkien property. Now then, without actually having yet seen any of the promotional stuff for this movie, aside from some drawings, we can't really say too much about what the story is going to be like, other than that they've said that they're really diving in deep into the story of Helm Hammerhand and his family. Basically, it's the fall of the first line of kings within Rohan, and it is told on a grand scale. I just went back and reread through that part of the appendices, and sure enough, it is going to be big. Do I necessarily want 500 Oliphants stomping around Edoras? Not really, and I don't think that we're exactly going to get that either. But instead, what we've been promised is that we've been promised a deeper dive into these interesting characters. From Helm to Freka to Wolf to, as well, Helm's unnamed daughter. And I like that we actually get more of her perspective right there. Especially so that way we can establish a tradition of the shield maidens of Rohan, of the women who have learned that just because they might not wield a sword doesn't mean that they won't die by it in battle, meaning that the women of Rohan are stern and hardy, and this is going to be one of those experiences that allows for a woman like Éowyn to come into being in the future. And not just that she will eventually be born as a kind of princess within Rohan, but that there is this tradition of war, of sacrifice, of honor, and that even the women themselves have a role to play in the art of warfare. I like that, and especially when you tell me that we're going to get more of Helm Hammerhand. I mean, just with what little we get of the guy, this guy is nuts. I love him, and yet, as they even talk about, he does make some big mistakes. His own uncouthness and impolite ways are what turn Freka and Wolf against Rohan and allow for the Dunlingdons to work together with the enemies of Rohan and Gondor to almost overthrow the entire nation. Now then, why do I feel a little bit more hope for the War of the Rohirrim as opposed to the Rings of Power? Well, it all comes down to so far what kind of pitches we've been given. I remember way back when, and I did a very early video on this, when we began to hear that the Rings of Power would have a female lead and that she would be close to Sauron, and this is before we began to hear the word about Galadriel being the main character in that series. I was like, this could be really interesting. If you create a new character who could have had a relationship with Sauron back when he first forged the rings, back before anyone knew who he really was, and that we could see him kind of teetering on, will I be a good guy? Will I be a villain? He turns out to be a villain, and this female elf basically goes on this journey of revenge, and that we could see all of the different epics of the Second Age and how they all lead up to the downfall of Sauron in the War of the Ring, and that she would play a role in introducing us, the audience, to all of these amazing heroes throughout the Second Age. I was sold on my fan idea, and then we got the utter crap that was the Rings of Power, which completely took a fat, steaming dump on the lore, made Galadriel into Guyladriel, made Mordor something that could be created with a twist of a key and the whooshing of water into a volcano, which... that kind of science is what's meant to work for underwater volcanoes, not overland volcanoes. I've actually looked at the research rather than read the front lines. God, oh, there were so many things that were done wrong in the Rings of Power, and even if you remove the lore and just take it as an original story, it sucks as an original story. It is so surface level stupidity preachiness with the most bland, contradictory characters I have seen in a long while. Oh boy, I didn't realize I was still this angry about the Rings of Power. This is why I took a break from talking about the Rings of Power for more than a year. Compare all of that nonsense from the Rings of Power and all of the pretentiousness from J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay and all of the people they've surrounded themselves with over at Amazon, and you compare that to just the genuine fun you have right here with Philippa Boyens and a couple of the writers for the War of the Rohirrim, and you realize this is a labor of love. This is what happens when you have actual fans and good writers getting together to talk about how they can properly adapt a story. And what's more is that they were all asking the right questions that a good adaptation should. How can we be true to what was given to us by the author? What kinds of things can we tell through this medium? She even goes on to this long whole pitch about how anime can convey all of this meaning, but also what kinds of limitations come with anime, why it would be great to work with the Japanese, who can then delve into their own rich culture and history, especially for a warrior's culture and history of the samurai, and how that even compares to Helm Hammerhand. I mean, Helm Hammerhand is basically like one of the, like his whole story and how he has his downfall falls right in line with some of the greatest Japanese epics of honorable samurai who die standing on their feet. It is cool. That's the right kind of thing that we as fans should want to see. But they also dive into, okay then, so what can we really draw from these characters? Yes, we know that Wolf and Freka are the bad guys, but how did Helm play a part in that? Let's pull that out a little bit right here. We don't necessarily want to make Helm a villain, but we want to show that he is a king with a lot of rough edges. And then Wolf, is there maybe some honor to this guy? Was there a chance that he could have married into the royal family and everything would have worked out just fine? How do we plot the trajectory of a man into villainy? And then, of course, we want to have epicness. And also, we know that this is not the Helm's Deep or the Edoras of the Lord of the Rings movies. This comes well before that. So what does it look like when it's fresh and new? How can we make it feel familiar yet ancient and new in its own way? These are good questions to ask for an adaptation, delving into the characters, into the world, the changes, and it's so good! Because that's what an adaptation is supposed to do. You're supposed to take a story from one medium and translate it into another and ask yourself, how can I tell the story that was told in the original medium in this medium and make it the best I can within this medium? So let's say from book to movie. What kinds of things can a movie do that a book can't? How can I bring out some more of these characters, especially since they weren't as fully fleshed out as we get from the characters in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit? On top of that, what can we do with animation? Animation has all different kinds of potentials and possibilities to it, but also has limitations. How do we work within the bounds of those limitations and possibilities to make the best story that we can? Those are excellent questions for any adapter to ask, because if you're just like, how can I make this story that someone else wrote my own? That is the wrong way of approaching it. But also, I'll be honest, I am excited to see what is done with The War of the Rohirrim as an animated feature, because Hollywood has been moving away from animated features. That's one of the reasons why you might have seen on Twitter people saying animation is cinema, because Hollywood is moving away from animation. They don't want to deal with it anymore. They're outsourcing it to other countries to do it because it can become too expensive stateside, but also it's a way for Hollywood to divorce itself from hand-drawn animation and even from CGI. Hollywood wants to go full live action, screw all the rest of it, and that's wrong. But here we have Warner Brothers working in tandem with Japanese studios to create a high-budget animated feature that takes place within Middle-earth. This is really big, because if it does well, this could open up the doors to other animated films, as well as bringing back the passion that should be in Hollywood for animated projects. And what I love coming from the interview with Philippa is that she even says that it only feels right to do an animated adaptation of The War of the Rohirrim because Tolkien himself actually approved of animated features for The Lord of the Rings. Granted, the animated movies that we got weren't exactly what he wanted, but that was a medium that he was familiar with, and it is a medium that can actually capture the wonder and the magic and the scope of Middle-earth. So with all of that potential right there, with all of these good signs that I'm seeing, and it's a great story, and it seems like they've got the right crew to put it together as well, I am excited for The War of the Rohirrim, because I really do believe that this could be an excellent movie. This could be that good shot in the arm that people are like, whoo, oh yeah, that's the adrenaline, that's the good stuff. This is Middle-earth. None of this Rings of Power crap. And if Amazon does hold true to their word, we'll see what that's like, that we will get another season of the Rings of Power later this year, it will also be the perfect comparison to see adaptations. This fan fiction whatnot nonsense from J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay versus The War of the Rohirrim. And if The War of the Rohirrim ends up being an excellent adaptation that holds faithfully, and I mean, you have to really bungle it to mess up adapting what you get in the appendices. If it holds faithful and adds in so much rich lore, character, and world building, and beautiful music, and just more of that sweet Rohirrim stuff, then it will be fantastic. And we can then clearly point and say, look, even after the Peter Jackson trilogy, which is one of the best trilogies, maybe even some of the best cinema ever made, we can still make great fantasy adaptations. We can still do great Lord of the Rings content. Screw you, Amazon. Or we'll get to see it crash and burn, in which case we will be here at Camille's Harem to talk about that and why that happened. So either way, we as novice authors, we are going to win because we're going to gain something out of it. But I'm really, really hoping, and I'm really, really excited for this movie, because I do believe that War of the Rohirrim is exactly what Tolkien fans need. So with all that being said, I will conclude my video for today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here at Camille's Harem, if you'd like to see some fun, engaging, interesting stories that are better than a lot of the drivel that Hollywood is cranking out right now, please check out the books that we ourselves have published. Links for them are in the description below. It would help us out a whole lot if you read them and left some reviews, but if you're just here for the fun of it, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing, and until the next time that we step into the fantastic world of J.R.R. Tolkien, tschüss.